and welcome to the Terminal Tech Talk series. If you're new to the series and you're not familiar with Terminal, you could just head over to terminal.io and find out more about our company. And if you're interested in job opportunities at Terminal, there's also terminal.io/openings. But most of you here today are on our live stream channel at terminal.io/livestream. This program is for you, and we're very excited about today's program. So if you have any questions for the speaker, please put them into the little chat roll widget on our live stream page. Our team is actively monitoring that, and we look forward to answering your questions. Lastly, if you're not familiar with Terminal at all, and this is your first time here, we build remote engineering teams for fast-growing businesses. And we would be happy to follow up with anybody who's interested in learning more after the show. With that being said, today I'm very privileged to be joined by special guest, the co-founder and CTO of Wavy, Nishay Ahmed. Welcome to the show, Nishay.
Hi, Nabil. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So as I mentioned, Nishay is the co-founder and CTO of Wavy, and I just want to give the audience a sense of her background before we dive into kind of like the prepared kind of questions that we have for her. But our team is monitoring the channels, and we can interject with any of your questions along the way. So Nishay grew up in Pakistan and moved to Canada at a very young age. She's always been interested in math and computer science. I think she even designed a rudimentary ATM system when she was in high school. And a fun fact about her is she's always been passionate and interested in Pixar. But ultimately, she ended up attending the University of Waterloo to study computer science, where she graduated with honors. And then after that, she got a job at Research in Motion, aka BlackBerry, where she worked on developer tools. And that was a relatively short stint because she ultimately decided to pick up and move to California, where she took a senior software engineering role at Zynga, which we'll get into later in the program, where she spent over 4 years there on various projects. And then shortly after that, she joined Tesla, and also as a senior software engineer, working on things that helped affect like the manufacturing product line. And we're going to dive into some questions around that as well. And then Nishay is an avid world traveler, so she decided to travel the world, but ultimately made it back to Canada, and specifically Toronto, where she joined a venture-backed business called Nudge, an awesome company who we've had their CTO on this program prior to this talk. And so at Nudge, Nishay was a server team lead, where she led a team as they really help frontline workers have like the knowledge that they need to be very kind of productive in deskless jobs. And then after a couple years there, she also got the entrepreneurial bug and was encouraged by her mentor and the CTO and co-founder of Nudge to dive into her own entrepreneurial journey. And that's when she decided to co-found and CTO Wavy rather. And at Wavy, we're going to learn a little bit more about that throughout the program. So let's start with this. So take us back to February 2010, the moment you decided to move to California. What made you pursue the opportunity to make games at Zynga?
Thank you, Nabil. That was a very great detailed introduction. February 2010. Let's go back a few years before that. So I've always been a very curious person. Like if something intrigues me, I love to just go into it and try it out. So that's how I got into computer sciences. It made a lot of sense to me. I ended up taking some really difficult courses through my undergrad that, kind of signed my life away for 4 months, but came out of that feeling very well achieved and like knowing a lot more, and like very, very glad and happy that I went through that experience. So while I was going through my undergrad years, the Bay Area was something that always intrigued me. It's the tech hub. What is it about San Francisco and the Bay Area that kind of makes it the tech hub? I was always very curious about that. So not so much the gaming industry, but more I found the opportunity. Zynga seemed like a really great company. It was based in San Francisco. I jumped on that. When I went through the interview process, their culture was really great. It seemed like the company really valued a lot of fun along with like a play hard, work hard kind of situation. So I basically went in as a software developer, spent 4 years over there, and like just had the time of my life. So the sort of things that I did over there, like I started out on the platform team, and I worked on their emailing system. Think about this, like I started first year after graduation, and I'm building large scale systems where I'm able to send out 1 million emails within an hour. And like I'm the owner of that system. That was an extremely rewarding experience for me. So basically it's a bunch of like, I was curious about what the Bay Area was all about, and just the opportunity, the wide array of opportunities that Zynga provided me. I could work on the platform team. I could go and like work in games, and I eventually did end up pursuing that. I worked on like new IP and like trying out what it means to like build out a game from scratch. It is what got me to Zynga, and then eventually progressing there.
That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, it seems like a pretty remarkable opportunity so freshly after graduation to be able to work on such large scale systems like that, where you can, influence, email systems that reach millions. So, but you had a diversified experience there. Like you've done things in DevOps, you've done things with social graph. You mentioned that you did push notification systems, right? In the transactional email systems. But you're also involved in like tools development and even production engineering. So can you kind of talk a little bit more about like some of the other areas of the business that you had an opportunity to work on at Zynga?
Right. So a lot of the roles and how Zynga was structured was your responsibility was development as well as DevOps. So it was like a well-rounded role in that sense. Mm-hmm. So to give you an idea of my journey, I started out on the platform team, moved over, got curious about what it means to be very much consumer facing, moved over to Cityville, did a whole bunch of feature development there, tried new IP in the middle, didn't really work out, and then moved over to Farmville. At that point, Farmville was a 5-year-old game with, a lot of history and a lot of data. So I basically did a lot of like feature development, architectural, infrastructure optimization, as well as, just like building new systems up from the ground up. The sort of stuff that helped me in being able to move between all of the different companies, the different teams, was really the ability for me to know the people in those teams. Like when you go into a new team, you kind of at least have one person that you already know over there. And then from there on, kind of understanding, okay, who has the business expertise in each of the different areas of a game. And like that side really helped me to understand like the business side, a lot of the context on why certain decisions were made and stuff. And then on the other side, like as I progressed through the years, I learned a lot more about how to really build out my tool sets. Like what is sort of the development environment that is going to help me really dive into any code base that I'm put into and understand line by line what each line is doing and how it's manipulating the database at the end. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually one of the things like I read about, like one of the references from your previous colleagues. Like they said, like, it's one thing to understand like your ability to get things done through people. Of course, people are what, ultimately make companies work. But, what some of your colleagues have said is that like and I'm sure you're being a little bit modest here, but they said that you have like an uncanny ability to understand large and complex systems, and your ability to like dive into a code base even and understand it quickly while keeping that systems and distributed thinking top of mind. So like that moves into like our next question, like what is your approach to like quickly designing, understanding, and implementing kind of large scale systems?
It's a two-part thing. One part of this, of really having a grasp of your environment, is the people side, and then the second is the technical side. So the people side is knowing who the owner of the information is, who has the best context based on the decisions that you're going to be making, and how you can really get like the best impact on the things that you're building. And the second is the accuracy of what you build, right? Like you always want to be able to build high quality features, high quality products. And it's a combination of the two that really helps you get a great grasp of what you're doing. So again, like I said earlier, on like the technical side, you've got your dev tool set. Understanding at the end of the day how your data is being manipulated is key. Your database, how each line affects any sort of user attribute is what is going to make or break your system. The other side of this is, and what I learned, by the way, Cityville, the frequency at which we were working, we were doing about 3 releases every day. So you have to be able to work at a very efficient pace. And I learned a lot about how to build out efficient processes while I was there. When you start, everyone gets into a room. When you start working on a new feature, everyone gets into a room and talks about it. What are the sort of questions that you want to ask at that time? Then you go into kind of your tech spec situation. How do you go about breaking down features in a meaningful way so that you can, reliably figure out how long it will take you to get each of those items done, and how many dedicated hours in a day can you spend on like writing code versus also communicating with others, taking some breaks, and so on and so forth. At what point in time do you bring in? It's a bit of a, you converge and then you diverge into doing your own thing, and then the team converges again. So initially everyone gets into a room and then you kind of converge. The developers do their thing, the artists build out their assets, and the QA team will start basically building out a lot of their test plans and stuff. So, and then eventually at the end of the feature development, you'll converge again. So learning a lot about these processes and making sure that the right parties are brought into your feature development process at the right time, and making sure that everyone has context on how you're progressing on building out the stuff that you're building is very important. Like, communication is absolutely understated in when you're building out a lot of your tech and product.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, 3 releases a day is pretty fast, and yeah, we know that like some of the companies we work with are also moving at a very fast clip and whatnot. So, kudos to you and your team for that. But I'm going to move a little bit off script here because we got a lot of engineers that are tuning in, and we already have some audience questions rolling in. So we could get back to the prepared questions, but on the chat room, Bridget, we have a question from Serena. She says, "Hello, Nishay. I noticed that you have spent a lot of your life moving around and starting over, and she's curious to know how you've coped with the unknown."
Oh my God, that's such a great question. find the communities that identify with your interests. Like basically when we moved from Pakistan to Canada, that was very natural. Like my whole family moved over and I went to school. So you naturally have access to a lot of different people, your classmates and stuff. Moving to San Francisco was a bit more of a challenge. And that's really where I had to figure out like, okay, what were my communities? We had a weekly soccer team. And I used to love going out and playing just recreationally, not super competitive about it. But that's really where I got to meet a lot of the people that I didn't work with on my day-to-day. So finding those sort of communities, eventually during my time over there, I also got into running. And that kind of proved to be another point, way of like talking to people in terms of like the things that we had in common and, not necessarily doing the runs together, but meeting up after we run and different things like that. So a lot of it was me going around and finding the communities that I could identify with. I also in the middle took a year off and I traveled. Got super into scuba diving. Like I absolutely love the ocean at this point, and it's something that's very deep to me. And so wherever I go, there is a diving aspect to that plan now. And that's where a big part of my community and my connections come in. So yeah, that's
so you like literally are diving into the unknown that way. So actually to parlay on that question, there's a question here from Aaron. I'll read it verbatim. He says, did you like SF itself as a city? Because Aaron just moved there from Toronto and it was quite a shocking adjustment, he says.
It depends on where you live. It's the interesting thing about San Francisco is the microcultures there. Like if you're in the Mission, it's very different from Noe Valley, or it's very different from Nob Hill to Soma, right? So in a way, it's amazing because if you want a complete change of environment, change neighborhoods. But in a way, it's a bit, unsettling because a lot of the other cities that you go to generally have like the same look and feel. I absolutely loved my time there. I think San Francisco has a lot of variety in the city and also in the suburbs. Like having the accessibility to the mountains over there is something that I really miss living in Toronto. And like the food options, I miss the burritos, to be honest. Like the Mexican food over there, I have not been able to find, other than in Mexico, I have not been able to find anything parallel to that.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's like next level. I before we even jump into that, there's another question from the live stream audience. This one's from Laura. I'm going to read it verbatim again. It's a fun one. So how do you communicate complex technical frameworks to people that are part of your company that are not as technical?
That is such a great question. Analogies, actually. Like finding an analogy to your framework will really help bring a frame of reference. There's always caveats. I don't think that you can always find the analogy that fits perfectly, but walking them through in speaking in English versus technical language, if it's a database, maybe you can relate to it more in terms of like username, or like speaking about user attributes and like what the data is that's stored in there, and kind of building analogies based on that has been very effective for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's a really good question.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, so
the one thing I want to add, the other side of it is it really helps if you're in a room where there's one-on-one conversation, it really helps understanding what the person on the other side, like what sort of language they speak. Because some people will go step by step and like, really, I need this problem broken down. And like, I'm more than happy to like write it out in English, or maybe like some sort of a pseudocode and stuff. or if they're more like, okay, I want the bigger picture, just tell me conceptually what you're talking about, then you don't need to go into the details. A lot of it is in gathering the context from the other side and understanding like what sort of language they like to speak as well.
For sure. Like, thanks so much for that. Yeah. And at the end of the day, storytelling goes a long way in using those analogies and helping, those frame of reference points. Even if it is a technical thing, you can try and find a way to just, make those references. So I want to keep kind of going because there's quite a few questions that we want to get through here. And so if we switch gears a little bit past the Zynga days, then you joined Tesla, and that was a different experience altogether. I know that you and I talked about that prior to the show. So can you describe the work that you did at Tesla for our engineering community and audience?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. So this is quite a few years ago, but when I joined, Tesla was doing 200 Model S's. The Model X hadn't released at this point. So we were doing 200 Model S's out of a week in production line. And their goal was to get to 700 cars a week, just churning out. Side note to this, the company, majority of their production line was still running on Microsoft Excel. And that just blew my mind. In terms of like the complexities that go in it, the power of spreadsheets really spoke to me through this experience. And also a lot of that is what I bring into my day-to-day work today, where it's like, if you find a solution, if you want to be able to solve a problem, going in and building it is not necessarily the right first step to take. Like, do the work manually first, make sure that it is a reliable and repeatable process, and then go into automating. And like, case in point is the Tesla example that I've seen there. So now coming back to like what I did, when I joined, we really wanted to up, and the team that I worked on was the part that was the team that was responsible for automating the manufacturing plant. Background, the way the manufacturing works, you've got a chassis, which is essentially the metal body of the car, that goes into a paint shop. This paint shop is literally a black box where the body of the car goes in, and 3 days later, it comes out nice, beautifully painted, and dries out for a couple of days and whatnot. Then it gets into the general assembly line. This assembly line is literally a line. So you've got different stations down the line, and the car will stop, the body will stop at each station and have multiple different options added onto it, right? Now, think of the complexity. You want to be able to build as many cars as possible. You've got 30 seconds per station. For example, 30 seconds per station. Every station must use up those 30 seconds to the best of its abilities, right? And if you have a delay on any single station, that basically brings down and slows down the whole line. So operational efficiency is of key at this point. Now, the other side of it is some machines and some stations along the way had multiple functions. So the one example here is you've got a machine. It's the same machine that's responsible for putting a two-wheel drive is the same machine that's responsible for putting a four-wheel drive. The difference there is you have to turn the machine off, context switch it, and turn it back on. What this does, it brings down the whole line together. And there's really no way around optimizing something like this. The only thing that you can do is make sure that you have as many four wheels that go into the production line at the same time, so that you reduce the chances of switching your context switching your machine. So basically there were a lot of, this is one side. The other side is week over week, you're going to have multiple constraints, right? It's also just-in-time manufacturing. You don't want to have too much of a supply of any single sort of spare part. And in the supply chain, we all saw what happened with the Suez Canal a few months ago. It was down. These sort of incidences happen all the time where your supply chain is going to be affected. So you can plan ahead as much as you want, but there's always going to be last minute changes that you have to accommodate to, and there's no two ways around it. So basically, the team that I was on was tasked with, and the main project that I did was tasked with building out an algorithm that would schedule cars based on that week's constraints so that we can push out as many cars as possible for that week, to put it down. You know, in a lot of the times when you're going through undergrad and you're going like doing a whole bunch of courses, they've got concepts, they've got theories, and you're like, when on earth am I going to use this? Case in point, this was one of those situations. Third year algorithms, scheduling algorithms. The work that we did at Tesla was textbook work, where you end up building out an algorithm that has dynamic weights associated to it. And week over week, you know, we kind of built a UI that took in each of these constraints, and at the back, it would associate each of those constraints with the options that users would choose to customize their car. And basically, like, that's the biggest project that we did over there, and very like unique in its character.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, and just for the context for the audience, like, we're talking about Tesla 6 to 7 years ago, but you know, between like 2014 and 15, and you know, like even today, I just saw that Tesla's like market cap is like basically that of all other automakers combined. It's like insane how far that company has come. But I do want to keep on moving here because we got a lot to get through. And so while the first section of this program was largely engineering focused, we're going to move into the second section, which is a little bit more like personal development and kind of you transitioning from an individual contributor to a leader. And so like, in fact, like there's a live stream audience question that kind of parlays into the question that we've prepared. So I'll read them both at the same time. And, you know, you can approach it however you'd like. But Maya on the live stream audience is asking, how do you maintain work-life balance as you're releasing a lot of features regularly? And then what we were going to ask you, which kind of parlays into that, was, can you, like, you've been quoted as saying, like, you see traveling as an investment in yourself, and any investment that helps you progress personally helps your career as well. And so our question was, can you describe an experience or two that you had traveling, when reflecting back on it, you found particularly educational or eye-opening?
Yeah, in terms of balancing pace and, you know, pushing out features, be mindful of the time that you need. It's going to take a couple of cycles for you to really understand. It's like, okay, I do a feature release. I need a day or two in the middle to just recover and recuperate. Whether it's going to be at work where, you know, you're just doing stuff that, like handling some tech debt or cleaning up some code that doesn't require a lot of deep thinking, or, you know what, walking away, taking a day off, and then coming back with a fresh mind. Like, understand, be mindful of the sort of breaks that you want to take and like when those breaks are best for you. That's how I've found the best balance for myself. And, you know, take an extended break. Take if you can, take a year off, or like find a project that really speaks to you and do it. So like I mentioned earlier, I took a year off, and that was basically in the middle of when I was in San Francisco and after, like, before I moved to Toronto. And that is when I really found my love for scuba diving and finding the ocean as a deep, deep passion for myself. The other sort of learnings that I did while going through that experience was, I come from Pakistan. Pakistan's a very collectivist society. There is a lot of importance given to your community and the context that you gain from your community and their priorities and stuff. So a lot of my traveling years, traveling months really taught me what is most important to me at the end of the day, and how do I balance my own needs with the priorities of my community, and like it really helped me find that center. And I think I can take a lot of those learnings into my day-to-day and into my work life and so on and so forth. The second side, and this is the most, so, okay, awesome. 1 year I was off, found my love for scuba diving, ocean conservation. I found a project in Indonesia that did grassroots level conservation. And so the second break that I took was, again, curiosity got the best of me. I went to Indonesia, to a super remote island, to be able to do grassroots level conservation. When I was in that world, I realized for someone who doesn't come from a science background, this world is very fragmented. We would go down and do surveys of the reef. So, how is the health of the hard corals? How is the health of the soft corals? What are the different types of fish? I had to learn about all of the different types of fish: butterfly, angel, parrot, Napoleons, right? There's a lot of learnings that I got from there. We would literally count all of the fish, write the numbers on boards, come back, put the data into the database, and boom, you're done. You don't know where the data goes. There's no real feedback loop. And that kind of left me wanting more. So during my time, again, I was in a community of other divers that were also passionate about the ocean and conservation. And so a lot of ideas started flowing, like two of my passions: diving, tech. How do I bring them together? I'm 100% sure that there is a solution over here that I could help and contribute to. So let's start thinking about something. So the idea that we eventually landed on as divers, and there's a lot of divers that are passionate about underwater photography as well. You take a photo, half of the things you recognize, the other half of the things you don't recognize, because we don't know, like there isn't, the knowledge about the underwater world is not that commonplace. So what if I took all of my photos, uploaded them into my app, and there was some sort of a machine learning algorithm at the back that would show me all of the different life that I saw, all of the different types of fish, the different types of corals, and actually be able to pin down where they were on it through image recognition. And then I have the option and opportunity to go and research on that. This was one idea that we came up with, which was a direct need, but then we could utilize this data to be able to monitor the reefs underwater and how they're changing. Like, the amount of effort and work that goes in right now, we can be a lot more efficient with what we're doing. And so that was kind of the idea that I started formulating while I was down there. And I don't think that I would have ever been able to dedicate this amount of thinking to solving out a problem like this had I not stepped away from my day-to-day, Fun fact, and this is something that I'm very proud of at this point, is a few weeks ago, I actually saw that NASA started to work on a problem or like a concept that's very similar to this. So that was, a moment of good job, Nisha.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And, I don't have nearly as much knowledge of the deep ocean or whatnot, but it did remind me of a time, like our team's pretty distributed at Terminal. We have people all across Canada, United States, Mexico, Colombia, Chile. And, prior to COVID-19, we had an all-company offsite, and we chose Vancouver. And one of the things that was surprisingly fun was we volunteered for a charity called the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup, and we spent a lot of time cleaning up around the shoreline on Vancouver. And it was a really fun experience and a great way to like spend a few hours with teammates that you might not have ever met in person. And so you're taking me back to that moment, but I want to keep going, because so your travels ultimately found you back in Toronto, joining Nudge as a server team lead. And so could you kind of like describe a little bit like what the experience was like for you moving from an individual contributor to now a manager and leader of a team, and sort of like what was like surprising in that experience for you, or things that you didn't realize, or any knowledge you might want to share with folks on this call that might want to learn more about what it's like to lead folks.
Absolutely. So the one thing in hindsight that I wish I had would be, I wish I had looked at it more as a career change than an extension of what I'm already doing. As switching into like a team lead, your day-to-day responsibilities and the things, the lens with which you look at the same problems changes. So when you're an individual contributor, you're looking a lot at your code, the quality of your code, maybe going out searching different design patterns or looking at different sort of technologies that we could solve the same set of problems with. As a team lead, my priorities change from code to people and how they work together, how they communicate together. And it took me a little while to really understand that to a very deep level. So I really wish that I had thought about thought about it as more of a career change while making the switch, rather than a natural extension, because I did end up caring a lot. I still do care a lot about the technical intricacies, but that's the developer in me. But really, my responsibility, a lot of my responsibility, is in the people in the process side as a team lead. To give you an example of this, where it really, like, this was my aha moment. We were all in a room, the whole dev team was in a room trying to evaluate whether we should adopt TypeScript over JavaScript, and like kind of really understanding in the lens of the piece of the system that we were trying to switch over the technology. And all of the developers came into the room. They were thinking, okay, how easy is this to learn? Does this excite me? How compatible is it with our current framework, all of the libraries that we use, and all of that. So it was a lot of I'm getting my hands dirty in this. What are sort of the things that I have to think about? When I came into the room, the thing that I found myself thinking about the most was, okay, we can spend 3 months doing a deep dive and really focusing in and learning about this new technology. What happens after? Is there continuity? Are people going to continue learning about the technology? Will there be a natural progression in what we build that can turn into something that is a lot more holistic? And that really was a moment where I realized, okay, I really am looking at the same set of problem with a different perspective and a different lens. And I think that's how I would summarize that.
Well, thanks for that detailed response. And yeah, I mean, I could totally appreciate too how, as an IC, like you're really trying to focus on, meeting your own goals and your own success, like how, across the team. But then, moving into leading folks, you want to make sure like you're focusing on them and like, how do you make them successful? How do you unlock things for them, or how do you help accelerate that? And that's shining through in your response. But we also have a couple more questions here from the live stream audience. There's a fun one here. So I know we're going to get into Wavy and we're going to get into like all of that very shortly. But I'm going to just jump over here to the live stream question. So Jess is asking, and I'm going to read this verbatim. What do you do when engineers on your team disagree with the next step in product development? At a previous company, our development team became very demoralized after we started disagreeing on what part of the product we should develop next. I'm curious to know how you would approach this and what advice you may have to solve things like this.
To me, it is a wonder on how big of a difference communication can make. A lot of the times I find there's disagreements because there is lack of context. we at Wavy, the new sort of stuff that we've started doing, and like last year at some point we went through a design sprint, which is literally a 5-day deep dive into, okay, here's a new concept. Now let's get into a room and collectively talk about all of the problems that we think are a problem, and go ahead and vote on, you know, what we collectively then think are problems, and then start working on solving them. So I'm unsure on like what the full structure and like how far along your team was, but really doing regular syncs so that everyone has context on what are the problems that we're thinking about today, how are the different approaches in the way that we want to resolve these problems, and so on and so forth. Like a lot of it ends up being resolved by bringing in the right people at the right time, and it's usually earlier on in the process rather than later on.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so we wanna start to get to the next question here. So, okay, so the next section is centered around, you know, yourself founding a company and ultimately pivoting a business, which is also focused on building team culture remotely. So, what is Wavy, and what made you make this decision to start the company?
Well, today, Wavy works on helping remote companies build a team culture that is better than an in-person one. That said, this is not how we started out. We started out as a company that was focused, me and both my co-founders are very passionate about travel. We decided to focus in on the local exploration space. How this started, co-founders Sean and Pete got into an incubator, started working and thinking about this specific area, a problem area. They both come from more of a business and marketing background, approached me and were like, well, Nisha, what is a database? Can you help us think about this? Like, what are the sort of things that we need to think about while solving this problem that is going to set us up for success in the future to be able to build out a technical product? And I was like, great. We got into a room, we did a full whiteboard session, and I literally remember building out decision trees down to the basics, right? Like that's where you have to start off. And how humans have a natural default decision-making process is literally everything that we mapped out, and it made a lot of sense. And I think we worked really well together. From there on, we progressed and started meeting week over week, talking about all of the problems. And I came on as an official technical advisor to Wavy. I think about a year in, they had enough of an idea of what the product was going to look like. And I was helping them interview to bring on the first technical person. And I think it was in the middle of one of these interviews where I was like, you know what, Nisha, what are you waiting for? Like, the idea works well. It makes a lot of sense to you. The people are amazing. You've worked with them in a capacity for the last year. Like, why not take the next step? And that basically thought and moment trickled into a ride that has brought me, I don't know, 2 years later in like, you know, post a pivot, post a pandemic, like where we are today.
Yeah, totally. Talking about venturing into the unknown. And so here you go again, right? So, and then of course, like the whole world was surprised by the global pandemic that we're all, you know, in some way, shape or form fighting through or battling or overcoming collectively. And so as we kind of look at this kind of remote first world that we're all in, and, you know, how do you think about, you know, building team culture specifically, but like what's also surprised you about the global pandemic that, you know, maybe you didn't really anticipate, you know, like after it was clear that there's this big challenge that we're all having to overcome? And then like, how do you think like it's going to change the way that we build team culture on a move forward basis?
This is really interesting. So to give you context on like the sort of product that we were building out at Wavy first, we tried two different ideas on the local exploration space. One was an app that you could put in your preferences, and it would basically, we worked with a variety of local experts that, you know, keen hobbyists. I love beer. I will know about all of the craft beer places within the city. And on top of that, I also know what's happening this weekend in whichever brewery, because I'm a hobbyist. I get all of the newsletters from all of the breweries around. Or I'm a very avid adventurer. I know the best hikes, the secret hikes in the city, as well as within a 40-minute perimeter outside of the city. So we were building out a lot of partnerships with these sort of local experts. And what we would do is surface a lot of these recommendations over to our users. One product that we tried out was a mobile app. A second product that we tried out was texting. And texting is what really stuck with us there. But obviously, in the pandemic, in this current state of lockdown, no one was going out anymore. Our idea essentially was null and void. We were like not 100% sure what we can do. We iterated, we tried a whole bunch of different things. We worked with, we started Wavy at Home. It's a bunch of things that you could do while you're at home. Everyone was basically looking for connection at that time. Overnight, your life had changed. So how can we help you in using and utilizing your term? Is there anything creative that you could do? Is there any learnings that you could do? On top of that, are there any local businesses that you could also support by, getting gift cards or ordering food or any sort of specials? So we iterated a bunch on that side. The next service that we launched after that was the I'm bored texting service, which is essentially a phone number that we shared with people. You could text I'm bored to it, and it would give back a recommendation that you could do in the moment, basically, and spend, the next 15, 20 minutes doing something. My favorite recommendation that came out of that was basically a real-time shark tracker. So, a lot of like the different sort of sharks, great whites, hammerheads, everything, they have a certain level of like tagging. And I remember looking at Nancy, who was in Atlantic Canada, and a few days later went down and was visiting the waters of New York. And I was like, great, I'm happy that you're, swimming around and like living your life, Nancy. But awesome. I think it was a great idea, but it wasn't super sticky for us. So one of the things while we were, working on the local exploration space was, one of the ideas was, in order for us to be able to really make our communities feel special, was to do high quality events that had a lot of influence from our local experts built into them. Took that same idea and brought it into the virtual world and kind of built our first trivia. Friends and family, word of mouth, built it out within a week, spoke to people about it, had over 100 people show up and got really great reviews on that. People were engaged, they had a lot of fun. We also noticed that everyone was really lacking that sense, that human to human connection, being in a room, doing things together. And that really brought a really great change from their day-to-day monotony. And so we're like, okay, this is something special. We should try and explore this side more. May long weekend was coming up. It was about a month away after we launched our first trivia. And we're like, we've got this idea. We've got a bunch of partnerships that we can leverage. How far can we push this idea? Basically decided to do a 3-day-long consumer-facing festival that had everything. Of course, we had trivia, we had acoustic music, we had electronic music, we did beer tasting, cocktail making, workouts, yoga, and I'm forgetting a dance class. Actually, the dance class was a lot of fun, where everyone ended up doing a synchronized dance at the end of it. but very successful, had about 500 people sign up for it and join over the course of 3 days. So after that, it's been no looking back. We started getting a lot of incoming requests from corporates that, same like we were in a lockdown, the life as we know it had changed day to day, had changed. So how do we, can Wavy help us bring that connection back? And so we've been doing a lot of team building events for the last year, but where we want to go is to really be able to help remote teams build a company culture that is better than an in-person one.
Well, yeah, like there's a lot there, and it's clear, like it's in part I'm hearing some of the themes of like ultimately finding your tribe or finding like collective passions of folks. Like you mentioned yours, the underwater world, like breweries in some cases and stuff like that. I know like for me, I'm very very into craft coffee. I've pretty much used every coffee maker known to humanity. I've bought beans from almost every city I've been to, and so like that's in fact, like at Terminal we have like a food channel which is very lit these days, and we also have like a high fives channel which is also lit, and it's gone a long way to build team culture because it allows you to talk about things that are not really work related, but where people really start to like light up with their energy and share their, this was dinner tonight, or I ventured into creating this item, and obviously we all got to eat, so it's something that's like universal in that sense. So but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say food's super universal. And like we have been talking about how we can do a lot of, you don't necessarily have to be in the same room to build a lot of the connections or to build familiarity between people, especially looking at our world today where we're all remote, we're slowly switching our time zones and spreading out geographically. So there is a lot of value in thinking about asynchronous experiences. You do your cooking. I know we've talked a lot about hummus and our love for it. I absolutely love chicken karahi, which is like food in every typical Pakistani home. These are our comfort foods. We also at Wavy have a food network, food channel, and we'll post a lot of photos on that. One of the conversations that we've been having at Wavy is, could we help companies create their own cookbook, that has recipes from everyone, like every food enthusiast, every cooking enthusiast, whatever is your comfort food, whatever is your home food, and really build that connection so that I can know Nabil and, some background of him without actually having that conversation. So when the time comes that we actually start to have a conversation, we can always chat about hummus.
Yeah, it's I think that's a great idea because like even like I was surprised to hear from Travis on our team, like his favorite food, he lives in Sacramento, but his favorite food is Afghani food, and so it's like nice. I was surprised to hear that, and he went into detail about like what he loves about the food over there and this sort of thing. So it really it's definitely, I like that idea though, a cookbook where you like kind of bind together like people's like favorites and helps people kind of come closer together through that. So that's awesome. I think like there's actually another question from the live stream audience. This is the last question from the live stream audience, unless there's any last minute there's some more coming in, but this is going to take us back a bit. So we're going to go back to like the first section here and I know that I think you had some opinions about this when you and I talked, but person says, so this one's from Aaron. Tesla's infamous in the engineering community as not having a great work-life balance. I could be wrong, he says, but was there a significant change in work-life balance when moving there from Zynga for you?
Wow, it's like you hit the nail on the head there. Yes, it was. also I'm a city dweller, so very stubborn on that I wanted to continue living in San Francisco, but the manufacturing plant was in Fremont. So I would basically hop on the Tesla bus every day, drive down for an hour and a half and back. So I'd signed up for a 3-hour commute, which took a toll on me. And then it's also very much a work hard environment where the interesting thing over there was Elon he was really great at setting a direction. He was like, this is where you need to be and in this amount of time, figure out how to get there. It's, in a way, it builds really great direction, but in a way, it kind of puts you in a scramble and everyone has to figure out their own direction and how to get there. It works really well for a certain type of person, but I don't think that it's the environment that every person can thrive in. I was very vocal about my commute when I joined. It's 3 hours in terms of maintenance did take a toll on me, but eventually we were able to figure out a way in which I would work from home one of the 5 days. Remote work, when you're working on a manufacturing plant, remote work doesn't come as naturally as doing just software. There's ways in which you can find balance and, have conversations again with the right people to be able to find how you can build that balance.
Yeah, no, that's intense. I mean, like two lifetimes ago, while I was still in undergrad, I used to work on feature films. I think I've worked on like 4 different feature films, and I remember working on this one show where I had to commute an hour and a half to the show, and it was a non-union set, so we had like 12-hour, 13-hour days. And so you add the commute to that, and it was just like you wake up, you go to work, you get home, you go to bed. Like there's literally no time for any balance of anything. Yeah. But that's kind of like the film industry where it's like, but I know we got to wrap up in about 4 minutes here to keep everything on time, but there's still a couple questions that just rolled in that we could get to, and then we could just wrap up the program. So the next question, from an anonymous user, are there, other than group activities, are there any other ways to build team culture in your mind?
That's a really great question. So essentially, culture, I think culture comes down to what you say and what you do. And the nature of how you're saying it or the nature of the actions that you're taking are eventually the things that define your culture. Other than team building and being in a group together, do you value listening, like the side of inclusivity? Do you value diversity? Those are other actions that you can take to be able to build a meaningful culture and meaningful environment around you. Learning and development is another really big aspect of building out culture, right? So how do you build a growth mentality? How do you build a mentality of you and the people around that is focused on continuous learning and always being open to other conversations and things like that? So it's not so much that you always need to be in the same room having non-transactional conversations. There's other actions that can add to it, but at the base of it, being able to chat about something spontaneously is what helps lead into a lot of the other conversations that you value and you want to instill into others.
Yeah, that's fair. And, from our perspective at Terminal, as I think about this question myself, there's a few ways that we try and build a good remote culture here at Terminal, and that doesn't involve group activities. And so just a few that pop into my mind is that we've instituted $1,000 US stipend for every employee that wants to spend on making their work from home setup better, whether that be, audio equipment, video equipment, however you want to slice it, chairs, desks type of thing. I know I bought an autonomous.ai desk for about $400, and that was like, 40% of the budget. But that helped me have a standing sitting desk at home in such a way where it was like super easy to work while standing and stay healthy that way. Another thing that we did at Terminal, we used to have a lot of snacks at the office, and that went away when we weren't going to the office. So we found a really good partner that would allow snack delivery to every single employee, regardless of the country or the market that they worked in, which was really cool and very popular. That tends to be one of the most photos shared internally. And then another way that we, is like, again, this is a solo activity, but like mindfulness is important. And you've even talked about that in this show. And, one way that we help people remember and think of and invest in mindfulness is we've bought like, previously it was Headspace, but now it's a Calm subscription where we have all access to all of the Calm apps library for every employee that wants to, again, invest in mindfulness that way. And that's another way that we show that we care about like, building culture, a healthy culture at work, if people choose to, leverage those stipends. But we're reaching the top of the hour here, and I know that we have a few more questions that are not answered. What I could promise for those individuals is that we could take those down and we can address them over email, just to make sure that everybody feels heard and validated that way. But we do have to wrap up. I do want to take this opportunity to say it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you, work with you on this program, and learn more about yourself and your background. You definitely, I know that you're in touch with the folks on our team about, what the Wavy can offer, Terminal in that regard. And we're happy to continue those conversations. And if there's any way we can be helpful, if I could be helpful as you grow your business in Toronto and beyond, please let us know. But thanks so much for doing this on behalf of like my team and the whole engineering community here at Terminal. It's been awesome to get to know you. And and the last thing I'll mention is that we do these every single month in Spanish and in English. And we have some more great programs coming up. And the next program is going to be about building high performance product teams. But here comes the music that Eric on the live stream is cueing. So thanks so much, Eric, for running the show on the live stream. And we'll reach out to all of you over email with the recording as well as the future details about the future shows. So thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.